welcome to the Great Debate. This is an event formed by We the People of New Mexico. And this kind of just gives us an opportunity to ask the three gubernatorial candidates, questions that we may be wondering. And I'm Elijah Gallardo. I'm here representing STUF, Standing Tall United for Freedom. And that is a group of, of teens who learn about politics and policy and things like that. And right now we have only one of the candidates, so the normal rules will not apply. And this is our first candidate, Mrs. Karen Bedonie.
Hello, my name is Karen Bedonie from the upper northwest corner of New Mexico. My website is bedonietough.com, and my clans are I am from the Navajo Nation. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, so the first question we have for today is it possible to have renewable energy and fossil fuels working together?
Definitely. I believe in a diversity of energy, but I do not believe that one energy needs to be stomped out for another one to exist. There's different parts of the energy system that helps with the people in their livelihoods. So for instance, people that have solar panels, I've been to homes in New Mexico who do have solar panels, and it seems to work economically for them to get off the grid, and they like it. And they also contribute back extra power back to the resource, to the source of actual electricity. But what I'm looking at too, and inside the urban parts of New Mexico, like Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, where they live in a very urban lifestyle, and I think an electric car would do well there. But for most of New Mexico that is rural, we need the muscle of petroleum, oil, and gas to actually have our livelihoods intact. Even though we have wind turbines, they still depend upon petroleum to, lubricate all the working parts in it. And there's about, I don't know how many, 40 gallons of petroleum oil, we're told, that in some of these wind turbines use on a daily basis. And when they freeze, they have to use petroleum-based products to de-ice them. So there is a pocket for everything. And right now in 2022, no matter what they're trying to sell us, I still think petroleum, oil and gas, coal, fossil fuels, they are the basis of a foundation of a very powerful, environment that we have. Because each one of us that have cell phones, we plug right into the grid every night to make sure our cells are charged up. And we're doing the same thing when you plug in an electrical vehicle into an outlet. You can't just plug it into a regular domestic size outlet. It has to be a very upgraded 260 above. And some of these things do catch on fire, so you understand that it takes a lot of power to charge these electric vehicles. So I think that there's a pocket for it, and if you actually chase the power system that goes through to charge these cars, you find either a diesel generated entity, and if they're caught on the side of a road, you'll also see a diesel generator producing power to get them off the road to save them. And then you also go back into the grid and you find out it's coal. Right now coal is also being attacked currently again, and coal is a big part of the resource of New Mexico that produces electricity. But I think there is room for all of it. And what the left has done is pinned us to think that we need to do away with oil and gas and how bad it is and how dirty it is and how horrible it is for the environment. When you really think about it, and I've said this before, that a road is a controlled oil spill. And where do the animals graze at? Alongside the road. Every time it rains, that's where everything, pops up. And the vegetation isn't dying. And also the wild animals that do graze along the road, it makes it dangerous conditions for drivers. They're not getting cancer, they're not, dying. They're actually, enjoying it. And so that's why they keep going to the sides of the road. And that's what the big problems are up north, is we always have animals all up and down the interstate. So I think there's a capacity for all of it to work together in a very cohesive manner, and the left pumping indoctrination for us to believe that one is better than the other or worse than the other, I think is wrong, and we need to be able to use all of our resources in New Mexico, and I do believe in a diversity of energy for certain circumstances.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, what is your opinion on government mandates?
That was one thing I really fought with during the pandemic, was the mandates of even the mask. I refused to wear a mask. It was an impact of my freedom because I didn't like it. I didn't like to be controlled or being told exactly what to do and told that I wasn't smart enough or responsible enough to be responsible for my own health. The mandates that they also pushed was the vaccinations, and currently the CDC is now saying that anti-vaxxers, the unvaxxed versus the vaxxed, they had different guidelines for us. If you're unvaxxed, you had to wear a mask. You had to test every week, you had to quarantine and do all this stuff. And right now the vaxxers were able to be more free, but we saw the vaxxers also getting sick from the different variants that they were saying that were passing. So when you see this happening, the mandates were wrong. The mandates from a government isn't always right, even though they say it's based on science. It's also science that is controlled by the government. I think less government is what we need, and we learned this from other states up north. Kristi Noem was a great example. In her state, it's a red state of South Dakota, she allowed the people to have medical freedom and also the freedom to choose what responsibility they wanted for their own bodies and their own health. If you chose a mask, that was up to you. Do it. If you didn't and you felt that your immune system was strong enough and it was able, to withstand, then they were able to make that choice as well. So I think government mandates are a form of tyrannical means, and it's something that we don't need to really use anymore, because I think the American people are smart people, we're educated people, we are one of the greatest countries in the world, and why are we treating our population like they are uneducated and we don't know how to read, we don't know how to study? So I think mandates, we really need to watch what we do. As a government, I believe in less government. I don't believe in mandates over people's lives. I believe they have the freedom to choose what they think is best for them, only for their personal understanding, I guess, when it comes to medical freedom, the right to try a medication, even though it's not fully tested. If they believe that it could save them, they should have the right to try. Also, mandates, restrictions of medication is what I don't also believe. The government is not giving us 100% truth on those medications. So we need to have the freedom to choose about how we intellectually be able to study and figure out what is best for us. And I guess that's my answer.
So the next one is actually pretty interesting. It's what can a governor do to fight inflation?
And this is probably the biggest equation right now, because Biden is not helping us. The administration that Biden is supporting is causing inflation. They cut off our pipelines for petroleum, and what happened, we had to pull gas. And when you have to ship it, everything starts to rise, because oil is a big marker on inflation and how the economy starts to fluctuate. Also, home buyers, people purchasing home, land, when everything starts to rise, you have to compensate with it with different means. So for example, a small business owner, like a flower shop, which we had, in order for us to ship our flowers in, because it was a perishable item, we ended up paying higher gas prices and higher everything just to get the product here. And it was very difficult, and we had to also compensate for the inflation of what they added to the minimum wage. It wasn't the living wage that they were talking about, but it was minimum wage. And when they did that, it caused the businesses to raise their prices so they can compensate for that. And also the insurance that the state put through, it made everything so high. So we're looking at it, and I always look at milk and beef inside their the supermarkets, and that's when you know something's going to happen bad. It's because everything starts to climb. Right now, beef is very expensive, and so is milk. And so these are the things. Inflation is caused by reckless government that does not know how to stop certain entities, those big parts of beef and also oil and gas, from inflating. When they pump it and it just starts to go up, then we don't know how to stop it unless we start adding more price tags and more dollar value to everything else, and everything starts to go up. So inflation, I think, is actually the government's problem. So we have to reduce that. And how do we do that? We have to take control of how we do our consumption locally. So I see New Mexico being absolutely dependent upon itself. That means we start buying our own oil and gas. It goes into our vehicles, and we're able to drive that price as far down as possible. We also need to be eating our own agriculture and beef. When we do that, we will be able to drive the price down of food because we'll be able to buy directly from the farm to the table and cutting out the middleman. And I think we all have to get into this act of pushing down the economy in our areas. So I'm going to actually ignite small business entrepreneurship and take away all the red tape that makes it so hard to start a business. And also we need to reduce all the different bonding issues, and you know, the red tape costs a lot of money because the state makes you have it. And so when you go through all the hoops, it stacks up, and pretty soon you're paying out the nose for everything. And it's difficult to run a business here. But if I reduce all that and take out the gross receipt tax and start to push down on what you are paying to the government that's also responsible for inflation, then you start to see what you can do to actually bring down the prices for your customers. Then you start to see it alleviate. But I think if we become prosperous, then we don't have to push the supply and demand so hard. Right now, the government, that's what they're doing, is they're pushing that supply and demand, so they're reducing the supply of everything. Because you don't see a lot of the things we used to have in the supermarkets or, you know, Walmart or whatever. And then the demand is there, and that's when the demand goes, the price goes up on everything. And it's trying to keep this in very simple terms is what I'm trying to do, because when you start talking real heavy business terms, you start losing a lot of your voters because they have no idea what you're talking about. But we have a plan. So 11 to 14%, we're gonna try to ignite New Mexico to start their businesses and chase their American dream. And this hooks into education, also hooks into the regular economy. And then we all hire, New Mexicans, where you get an actual credit for hiring New Mexicans. You don't have to pay out the nose in your taxes. And then you start to see us alleviate the social programs, and also supply and demand starts to come down because we start supplying what we need here. And I think that's where inflation, we need to get a hold on it in our own state. And whatever's happening out there in America, they're gonna have to do the same thing, because Texas is our neighbor and we depend on them for so much. But their inflation is not as high as ours. Ours is through the roof because we are so dependent and we are restricted by our own government to have what we want. So the demand is very high, so the prices of everything are tripling and doubling, and you're seeing it happening everywhere. So even to get a steak in these restaurants, they're pulling beef off the menu if you haven't saw that yet. But traveling through New Mexico, you can't even order a steak anymore because it's gone. Now they're doing ground beef, everything. They're doing, chopped steak and different things. And so you're seeing it happen right now. But I think if we can restrict the powers that be on the outside from influencing our economy, we can actually get our inflation under control and we can drive it back down. And I'm hoping I made this answer as simple as possible, but it's a very complex and intellectual question. But when we get in there, we know what we have to do and where we have to cut and what we have to, get control of back for the people. And the people need to have an input. And the supply, we need to make an abundance of the supply of what we can produce here in New Mexico. And then we have to start driving those prices back down. The first thing is oil and gas. We need to make sure our shipping charges and everything that's oil and gas related is pushed back down, where we supply ourselves first before we supply America. Right now they're restricting us, but oil and gas here in New Mexico supplies 40% of the country. So it's important that we get control of that first.
Okay, so what in your opinion best qualifies a candidate for governor?
The best qualifications for a candidate for governor for any state is to make sure that candidate is actually from that state and has grown up there and has actually worked there and raised their children there and wants to retire there. Right now, we have so many people. If you go through history, even Richardson was not even a New Mexican. Susana Martinez, I believe, was a Texan. And you start to go through our history of our leaders, and the ones that weren't really from here, seems like they didn't really love us or care for us or knew what they were doing that impacted us, because within those capacities of those different areas, time zones, when they were governor, we had some really terrible things manifest here in our state. One is Zorro Ranch, nobody wants to talk about. We were trafficking children for a very long time. We've been trafficking girls. And it's hooked right into Epstein, and it goes right into DC. I think New Mexico's very dirty because we had governors that allowed this to happen. The second thing is it was a governor that brought in the Dominion machine. She was Republican. This is Susana Martinez. It was her campaign manager, Jay McCluskey, that ushered that thing right in. Now we're dealing with it on a huge area because they were not prepared to project into the future, because I don't think they wanted to be here the rest of their lives. So they make decisions that impact for them, maybe 10 years, 20 years, it's good for them, but not 50 years. Because if you have a lineage here and you have people here, your grandparents were here, they homesteaded here, you have dedication to the state and to the people, and you don't want to be the generation that drops the ball, definitely not. And then you start to project forward because you retire here, then your kids grew up here, then your grandkids are coming, and you start seeing it happen. I really think we need to have governor candidates that are actually New Mexican. They can't just come here and tell us what they're going to represent us and tell us how we're going to live and what they're going to do with us. They completely devastated everything. Our entire economy, our school systems, our elections, everything that we're crying about today was because of carpetbaggers that came here and told us what we needed. They never asked us, and they never really took us into consideration. So I think the most strenuous thing, the importance of a candidate, is to make sure that they are from that state. If they didn't grow up there, they have no business running for governor. They need to go back to their home state and fix it, because obviously all 50 states, we are in a mess. We have the worst administration. If they really cared about America, they would go home and take care of their families, not come here and tell us how to do it, because New Mexico is very diverse. We have so many different cultures, we have so many different traditions, and we're uber traditional. We believe in where we came from. A lot of us can trace our ancestry back generations, 8, 10, and my family has been here since the beginning of the state. They drew the lines around my family, and we found ourselves in a place called New Mexico. I have been here since the beginning. That's what my blood tells me. So I think that's the most important thing, is that a New Mexico governor needs to be actually New Mexican.
Okay, I guess this kind of applies to me as well, but is there any hope for our youth in New Mexico?
The only hope is a Bedonie win. Honestly, it's what I think, because we are 51st, even though MLG is shopping a 49th place. There's no hope without my win, because we see what's happening to the children. We need to go after the ones that are lost right now. We hear stories of things that's happening. We know the drug infiltration into our schools. We figured it out. We did a lot of research and also investigations of our own, and we figured out exactly what's happening to our youth. Our youth are leaving here right after high school because there's nothing good here for them to stay. We need to make sure that we invest in them, not just saying it and using the youth as a platform, but to really be able to find the leaders in the next generation. Because honestly, I only have maybe 25 years left in the tank before I, gas out. I'm gonna have to find the next leadership, and we're gonna have to invest in them, not just saying it, but literally train them and tell them this is what politics is about. This is civics. And then our whole vocational is teachings and education system is gone. I mean, we have all these kids here that do not have fine motor skills or gross motor skills. I mean, I have not met a young person yet that could weld as good as we did, because they're so busy doing other things. They're sitting in a classroom for 12 years with no guarantee that they're going to be educated in any type, way or form. But to be able to go into these family-owned businesses and see their children working it, we should be able to give them that understanding of the choice that they can actually take over the family business. We need to invest in our youth, not just saying it for political stance, but to really do it, so that we can sit on our porches and say, you know what, New Mexico's going to be okay. That's what I want. Right now, we look around and we're like, I don't know if we're going to be okay. What's going to happen when we grow old? Are they just going to stuff us somewhere? And hopefully we don't make enough noise that they don't hurt us. And so we need to make sure that the youth have a place. They also have a future, and we have to work hard to project past them, not just them, but our grandchildren. And so when I parent my children, and sometimes like, wow, Mom, you're so strict with us, I always tell them it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with my grandkids, because I have to make sure that they're fed and they're taken care of. And that's the same mentality we need to put inside politics for New Mexico. We're not strict, and we're not trying to, just throw any kind of education at you. We want the right education for you in accordance with your American dream. And it's going to help make sure that you love your children to come, because right now we're losing kids to drugs. We're losing kids to runaways. We have homeless kids. We have so much happening out there. A lot of them are actually traumatized. And trauma, as we know, is the gateway and the doorway to crime, and also a very socialistic type of life where you're living off the government. So the only hope for the youth that I see is going to be through an election where Bedonie wins. After that, then we don't have any other course, because I don't see those other two candidates that even have a reflective understanding of the youth of New Mexico.
All right, so what is your opinion on the gross receipt tax on small businesses in New Mexico?
My opinion is it doesn't need to be there. I'm going to work really hard to get rid of the gross receipt tax. MLG actually inflated it last year. She signed it in, and then she started to campaign, and then she started to say, oh, well, we're going to back out of it. I'm like, wait a minute. So you up it, and then you're going to take it back down, which means you really did nothing. So the gross receipt tax doesn't help anyone, especially New Mexico businesses. It hurts us because we end up paying an extra tax that goes to the state. And the state is in business for itself. So that's one thing I need to get rid of, because they're taxing in crazy ways, even with the websites. When you ship something to somewhere else, and because you don't have an actual brick and mortar business, the gross receipt tax stipulates that you will have to tax at the destination. And it's causing problems with people that are, trying to build a business, and they're using the internet to do it. So it just gets more complicated, but I think the gross receipt tax is more harm than good. And so for me and my administration, I want to get rid of it, because we need to ignite our economy.
Okay, so throughout this whole time, you have been campaigning for governor of New Mexico. What would you consider the most important lesson you have learned?
The most important thing I've learned is you gotta save up for tires, because to campaign this thing and to make it across the state, it takes a lot of rubber. And if you're not ready for that, to actually get on the road and to sit with people in their homes, to sit with them in their businesses, to see them, then you're not ready to run for governor. You need to go to every nook and cranny in this state and see what the people are really up against. We are so diverse that we have people that are up against crime, that are targeted. We got people that their land is being overrun by immigration from the southern border. We have people where their towns are turning into ghost towns. We have roads that are crumbling. And I honestly, my biggest lesson was to have a clear understanding when you go somewhere to see how bad it really is. It was heartbreaking when you go out there and you sit with the homeless, when you go out there and you sit with a farmer, when you ride the tractors and you watch them suffer through it. And I wasn't prepared, because I thought I had it bad, but all of New Mexico is equally having a struggle. And so for me, the biggest lesson was to open my heart bigger than I ever thought, because now I have to look at all New Mexicans as my brothers and sisters, and I'm not gonna go over here and lead over you. I'm gonna sit with you, and I'm gonna ask you to help me lead this state to fruition and also prosperity. So that's exactly, I think the lesson that I learned was this, to have a big heart and to also pray for our people, because I wasn't prepared for what I was gonna find. I wasn't prepared to find people sitting in the front of the Dollar General shooting up in Tucumcari. There's drugs everywhere. There's cancer happening. To hug a lady who was dying of cancer, and she said that I might not make it to see you win, but I'll be cheering from you, for you from heaven. And she was riddled with cancer, and I just couldn't believe that our state couldn't help her. She died very poor. I was in her home. But that was the biggest lesson for me, to understand the pure humanity of our people here. And I'm not just talking about, the Navajo Nation. No, I'm talking about all of New Mexico. I've been to every dot on that map. And there's for the people that I have seen. They're the ones that are moving this campaign. And that's why we stay, and that's why we work hard, and we go round and around. But the biggest lesson is you gotta have tires to do it, at least 4 sets. Then you can go.
Okay, so that's all the questions we have for this list. We do have room for 3 more questions, so if anyone has one, you can go about that right now. Okay, I'll actually to just get one here right now. Yes, it says, where do you find the energy to keep on going day after day?
And a lot of people think I'm a machine. Actually, that's top secret. A lot of it is just a lot of love from the people. What I've learned is when you start to build a family across New Mexico, you're not going on the job consistently. When you touch down in certain places and they receive you, it's their energy that is giving me energy. When they cook for you and they feed you with love from their home, you go to their businesses and you see what they're doing. You meet their children, you play with their dogs, and you literally absorb their energy, and that's what keeps me going consistently. And then when we do have the time, there are times when I do, wind down and I sleep for maybe, out of the week, I think maybe I do like a whole 10-hour night. I'll squeeze that in sometimes, and then I'll sleep really hard, and then after that I'm pretty good for another 3 or 4 days. But the energy part of it, I think it's the people. It's just really going to visit your family. So I'm actually going to head south after this, and I'm going to go see another branch of our family. And I know she's going to feed us. I'm really excited. And that is what makes me go, and you keep going around and around. So basically all you're doing is driving from family to family, and that's how it's done.
Thank you for that clarification. I was actually starting to wonder. Okay, so I do actually have one right here as well. So the homeless population is growing rapidly here in New Mexico. It's becoming a really big problem. What are your plans to help fix it?
Well, I've been on the ground, actually. This is kind of a lengthy one. We went to find the homeless, and I wanted to know, is it New Mexicans that are out there, or who's out there? They're in these tent cities. And I went, and a lot of people were scared, like, you shouldn't go out there without a gun. I'm not gonna shoot them or anything. That was just, it didn't sit right. But we went out there, we prayed with them, and we fed them. And then I ended up finding people that we actually knew. We had Navajos that were out there, we had veterans that were out there, we had moms that were out there were some kids out there. And you just talk to them and ask them the questions. I think it's 50-50. There are 50% of New Mexicans out there where they just can't make it on the hamster wheel. Inflation, cost of living, the price of houses, they're just done. They couldn't do it. A lot of them are, it's riddled with drugs too, so there's a lot of drug parts of it happening. But the reason why the compassion is there is because my cousin brother was one of them. He was hit on, I think on Candelaria and San Mateo, I believe, out there. And he, we had to put him away, and he passed. And so I did have relatives out there that were homeless. And they didn't want to go home because they do have a sense of pride. They don't want to be a burden on anybody, so they do stay out there as opposed to taking a handout. They are scared because living out there, you create a whole, I guess, a wall, a barrier for between you and the regular civilization, and you're afraid that you could get judged or hurt or harmed in some way, so they don't want a big apartment. And when they sit there and they get something given to them, like they'll say, oh, we'll put you up in a house, an apartment, we'll give you whatever you need so you can get started. When they're there, when the 5 o'clock hits and everybody goes home and they're sitting by themselves and the sun goes down, I asked them what really happens in them. They said they freak out because they're sitting there and they start crying. Why do I have to get this when my brothers and sisters that are on the street are still out there? So they feel guilty. So the guilt is overbearing, is what I found out. And so they invite all their friends in, and pretty soon it turns into this big, party, and they all get chased out again. But they like being on the street, and it's because it's a sense of community. It's a sense of belonging. So they're looking for, I guess, love. And I think that the state, the government has played too far a part in it, because there's a pastor out there, his name is Chewy, and I visit with him for a while. He said that his greatest roadblock in his journey to help heal these people was the government, because they restrict him. They stop him from feeding the people. They said, you don't have, all the permits and different things. You can't be here. And he says they are the greatest roadblock, is the state, the federal, and also, the city that stops him from helping these people. So we have to open that up. And I think humanity and actually the churches need to start pitching in, and they want to, but they're restricted from 501c3s again. It's always the government that's in the way. And so my job is to pull the government out of the way. But also mental health is a big part of this. We have to make sure we give them the mental health that they need. And they have a great medical program for them in Albuquerque, and I was amazed, because I'm like, wow, this is better than most people have it. But it's not enough. They need to have a sense of actual worth. You have to give them a job. What kind of job can they do? Because they're drug addicts, the hygiene part of it, they threw out the window, and they have gone nose deaf. So where do you put them, and how do they stay safe among each other? And they like to have that community sense, so I think we have to build a community for them where they can get a job. That's what a lot of them do, because I did go into California, down into Skid Row, and there was actual left Democrats handing out tents. Oh, do you need a new tent? And I was like, this is crazy. They're actually adding to the problem. And I was watching them, and a guy was basically took the tent and started beating on them. He says, I don't want your stupid tent, I want a job. And I thought, wow, interesting, very aggressive. But the guy I was with, he explained to me, he says, you don't go down there and give them what you think they want. That's the same thing we do. We don't want. The government and the politicians are basically shoving this down our throats. We're gonna tell you what you need, even before we ask you, because it's what we think you need. Same thing with them, but it's at a different level. So he says, go out there. And he was a pastor too from California. He took a bottle of wine. I thought, this is interesting. Little cups. And then he took cartons of cigarettes. And we went to the native community, the native homeless. And he says, they're struggling. They just need to get the edge off. And he says, when you're ready, come up to the church and we'll pray for you, and we'll see how if we can get you on the right track. He says, we've saved so many by giving them just a little bit of sip of wine and giving them a couple cigarettes so they can take the edge off. And then that's when they know, wow, they're really listening to me, they really care. And then he says, and then they come out and they come to the church and we help clean them up, and then they move on to the next level. He says, but you have to think of it from their terms, from their feet, and then you'll finally start to make sense of it. And your compassion is not so judgmental, but it's what they really need. So we have to basically go in and talk to them and the people that work with them. And I have a plan for it. We have a very good plan. I've been working for it with a doctor. She's actually a doctor of psychology and counseling, and she finds this absolutely fascinating, and we've been looking at it and we've been researching. We have different plans coming in that have worked and been successful. And I met with people who went from homeless that are now actual supporters of the Bedonie campaign. One of them is one of the greatest researchers I have. He is a veteran, and he was in actually intelligence and also communications. He's the one that digs for us, and he used to be homeless. And it's because we never judged him, and we just love him. And my prayers go out for him and his sister. His sister is currently not doing very well. But the homeless, we have a plan, and they're not a problem. But I think we have to love the sinner and not the sin. And if we have that compassion, understanding, I think we can actually wipe out our homeless in New Mexico.
Okay, we have them? Okay.
Hi, I'm committed to the Bedonie Tough campaign, but there are people on the fence, and the narrative is a vote for Bedonie is taking one away from Ronchetti, which will keep MLG in. And what would you say to those people?
What I would say to those people is I think they have to have a little bit of leap of faith. The whole time that we've been inception as a state, we've always voted for the lesser of two evils. There has never been a candidate that has inspired anybody to vote. We're just like, oh, and they go and they vote. I'm here. They can't blame me for the last cycle. when MLG won, because it was just a Republican versus a Democrat. We never had enough Republicans. Guess what? We don't have enough Republicans again. A lot of them jumped ship and they went to independents, and no one's talking about the independents. You know what? Mark Ronchetti is not entitled to votes. As a good American, when we tell you entitlement is actually a crippling understanding of indoctrination. He is not entitled to any vote, neither is she. It is a free-for-all because it's a general election and it's an open election. Now, if you look at the numbers when we came in after the primaries, I'm sitting at 9%, and they made fun of me. Oh, you know, she made 9%, she's so stupid, she thinks she can win this, it's impossible. But guess what? The libertarians were on this side freaking out because they're like, holy smokes, we never cracked 3%. How is this even working? So, and they're like, she's at 9%, and they got excited, right? So then you do the math. So she's sitting at what, 41%, and he was at 47 or something. It was all kind of going backwards because all the polls were dumping in. But if you just do simple math, I thought, you know what, if I could take the voting base of the patriots and the good Americans that understand what I'm doing, the people that have some faith and actual some courage, because it does take courage to actually go against the machine. I had to have a lot of courage to leave the Republican Party, and you saw the abuse I've gone through. I'm still going through it. It takes courage and conviction, and I'm still standing here to tell you that, you know what, the abuse, it's doable. You can get through it. 15% from the base of the Republicans. I think I already have it. I think we're sitting at a high 20. I honestly think so. I think we're dividing the snot out of it, honestly. We're also dividing MLGs. She's not working that hard. Her commercials are soft. Everyone remembers 2020. It was the worst ever for any governor. She is going against, she's trying to gather up her people, but there's only a lot of leftists, the progressives that like her. Those are the ones that are loud. There's a lot of moderates, a lot of traditional New Mexicans, Hispanics, Navajo, Apache, Comanche. They're here. All I need is 15% of those Democrats, which are my parents, my grandparents. Those are my people. 15%, then you do the math. They're all gonna drop into the low 30s. I can crack 34% to 37 to 38% and still win. Hopefully it's more. If I can crack the 40s, it'd be great, because you can tell them that, you know what, we did the work and New Mexico's now gonna stand. It is so doable that it's so fascinating and exciting, but the people that are still sitting there, oh, she's gonna split the vote, tells me that they're not looking at it, or they can't see it, or they're not researching. And then it kind of questions, well, then if you can't see it, then I don't know how to help you, because it's there. And when you just think about it and you do the math, you're like, wow, this is actually really possible. And when you're on the ground with the real people, the grassroots, so the people that are loud, there's only a handful of them. It's a handful of Republicans and Democrats that are players. And then even donors. Donors that have been dumping money into Ronchetti, there's only 247 donors that put him where he is. All I need is more than 247 votes to cancel that out. I think we're doing it. And we're doing it by families, because we are traditional New Mexico. We are taking entire families with us, not just one-on-one votes. And so it's exciting. And so what you need to tell them is have you ever done anything right because it felt good? And this is the first time you're going to be able to vote for someone that stands with God first, started her campaign, that knows what's happening, that can fight socialism and communism, that isn't afraid to stand there and say the truth, that has a voice big as day. And if you've ever seen me get wound up on a stage with over, hundreds watching me, woo, it's good stuff, and it feels good, because you know what, it's the truth, and we push it back out. Then you watch my videos where I quiet down and my motherly voice kicks in. Then you understand that's the compassion that's gonna fix everything that they completely decimated in our state. So tell them, I am the mother that's gonna come in and fix everything. I'm gonna care for the babies, I'm gonna save the children, but I am gonna wage war on drugs and crime, and you're gonna watch me roar when I go down to that southern border, and you're gonna see the earth move, and it's gonna be amazing, because I believe this is what I was built for. That's why I was able to have a very easy family of 8. My kids are a reflection of me. They are my fruit, and they're good kids. And so yes, I'm on a mission here, and just tell them that there's hope, and there's hope in the Bedonie campaign, and that's all I can offer. But I can't reach in their head and fix it. you know, the doubt that they carry is all from trauma because they've been through years of abuse, and that's what that is. Thank you so much.
Eight kids still blows my mind. Okay, so that was actually the last question we had for today. I would like to thank you for coming and you know, giving us your time. This is actually the fifth or the fourth of many of these debates. The next one is going to be in Las Cruces, New Mexico. You can find this video online or wherever you happen to be. But we really need you guys over there in Las Cruces because we need more people to show up. I pray that we keep it a nice, clean race, you know, because if they keep doing this, and I don't know if I can stay here any longer. But thank you. That's all the time we have for today.